I already did a video about the United States getting the bomb, but I kind of wanted to redo it and just do one solid video of every single country getting the bomb, because it's an interconnected story of like theft and espionage and just people saying, I want that. There's like 10 countries that built the bomb, with one of them technically not having them, which we'll get into which country that is. And then there was a few Soviet satellite states that just were grandfathered them after the Soviet Union's divorce, and then Daddy Russia wanted their money back. The science of being able to build a bomb, like the possibility, the theory of it, already existed, but there was no reason to build it. Nobody was trying to build it yet. I mean, why? We already had a shit ton of artillery that could level a city. There's just no point. And again, it was just theory. They were like, it could happen, but we don't know, so why waste the time, energy, and resource on it? But then America got wind that Germany was building a bomb thanks to Albert Einstein, which, as a scientist, it's kind of crazy to just know that it's your fault that the atomic race began. But it's a good thing that you did it, because it's better that the United States got the bomb than Nazi Germany, especially if you were Jewish. Flee Europe and tell Roosevelt they're making it. They're making the thing that we're scared of. So Roosevelt goes, we're gonna make the thing, which is like kind of a perfect analogy for Roku's basilisk. Like it won't exist unless people start making it, and then you're not gonna make it. Why would you make it? It'd be crazy. You don't want that power out there. But then you hear this guy's gonna make it, so you go, well, fuck, I gotta make it. So the U.S. launches the Manhattan Project, as you know, and if you didn't, high school has failed you. And the whole point of the project was to build the bomb before the Germans did. And this employed literally hundreds of thousands of people all across like 3 primary secret sites, which is just in crazy short amount of time that all this infrastructure and all these jobs were created. So the economy was just booming. Those sites being Oakland, Ridge, Hanford, and Los Alamos. Again, if you've never heard of that, history class has failed you. So the lead scientist of the Manhattan Project, Oppenheimer, good old Oppie, him and all his fellow nerds were all like they're working on the bomb, just nonstop around the clock, and this led to the Trinity test. So by July 1945, the test is underway, and the world has changed forever. We officially have entered the nuclear age, which is a win for humanity, and also an L for humanity. And not too long after, the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, if you're really inquisitive, you wonder, why didn't they just drop it on Tokyo? Well, that's because Tokyo didn't fucking exist anymore. For you see, where one plane, the Enola Gay, dropped 2 bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there were hundreds of planes dropping thousands of firebombs all across Tokyo. In fact, the firebombing of Tokyo killed more people than the nukes on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Little Boy ended up killing like 70,000 people, and Fat Man killed like 40,000 people. Even though Fat Man was a bigger bomb, it just was the way and where it hit the city, just more population density, all that shit. And that's a lot of people. 70,000 and 40,000 people dead just instantly or in a very short amount of time. It's crazy. However, in Tokyo, over 100,000 people died because of the firebombings. And nobody talks about that. It's crazy that many people died in an air raid over a capital city, and it's never fucking talked about. So the United States, they used their bombs, they announced to the world that the nuclear age has officially begun, and only the Americans can have such power. So before the bombs were dropped, there was the Potsdam Conference, which was a meeting of a lot of the Allied leaders, and Truman leans into Stalin and goes, we built a bomb of unusual destructive force. I would love if that's how he sounded. And Stalin looked at him and just went, cool. Because they already knew. Stalin had spies in the American program, one of them being Klaus Fox. In my previous video, I already stated that I love calling him Klaus Fox. It's hilarious to me. Even though it's not pronounced that, if you read it your first time and you didn't know, it sounds like it. So Klaus was working at the Los Alamos program, just secretly gathering information and selling it to the goddamn Reds. Right after the war, Stalin orders his own bomb program to build a bomb factory to make bombs. And their project was led by a scientist named Igor. Of course it was. So Igor Kurchachev and all of his goons used the information that they stole from the American program to build a bomb just 4 years after the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So the Soviets developed their first bomb. It's called the RDS-1, which to me stands for Reds Destroy Society, obviously. McCarthyism is very much alive and well through me exclusively. And they test the bomb in Kazakhstan, which is just an immense honor for being a satellite state under your regime, thus ending America's monopoly on nuclear power and starting the Cold War, which was very hot because a lot of people got shot. Mainly the people that got in the middle between the United States and the Soviet Union's pissing match, making the Soviet Union the second nuclear power. And now this is where the UK joins the story. Actually, they've been a part of this story because they helped the Americans build the damn bomb. Because the British have actually been working on a bomb before the Americans on a project called tube alloys, which doesn't sound nearly as badass as the Manhattan Project, so suck it. And during the American Superior Project, the British scientists were actually sharing their findings with the Americans, giving them a little bit of a head start. And then once they developed the bomb, the Americans just cut off the British because the U.S. passed the McMahon Act, which basically says only us. Which, as an American, I'm a little biased. That's such a badass power move. But the British were like, oh, what? That's not very nice. Get your own program, you nerds. You sound funny. So, rightfully feeling betrayed, the British started their own nuclear project. They had the knowledge of how to build it. They just didn't have the means because, you know, Germany leveled their entire country in an air raid. Absolute rubbish. Absolute rubbish. It was terrible. And despite the financial strain and their post-war rationing, they ended up doing it. They in 1952, they tested the bomb off the coast of the mainland Australia on the Montebello Islands. Which, yeah, let's nuke the continent where we dropped off all of our unwanted prisoners, making the UK the third country to develop nuclear bombs. And then the French, those bastards, become along. Very much like the UK, the French lost its colonial empire, and they were just a shell of their former self following the end of World War II. And they were tired of depending on others, especially Americans, which thanks for the statue, by the way, which is green now, so thanks for that, and thanks for helping us with the British, but fuck you. Your people are a bunch of pricks, Paris is overrated, and your food's pretty good. Other than that, so the French president, Charles de wanted to stand independently from NATO and other superpowers, borrowing uranium oh so respectfully from their African colonies. In 1960, they detonated their first nuclear bomb in the deserts of Algeria, which is a really funny way of celebrating over a century of colonialism. It's a really big damn firework for the occasion, which was nearly 4 times the size of Hiroshima. So now we have the fourth nuclear power, moving on to China. And China has just gone through decades of invasion at the hands of Japan, humiliation from other foreign powers, you're welcome, and civil war, because fighting everybody else just wasn't fun enough. And Mao Zedong, he wanted China to be a superpower. He wanted them on the world stage to be an equal, just not for his own people. And in the 20th century, being equal on the world stage meant having the bomb, which China got help from the Soviet Union to build the bomb, which the Soviets got from stealing from us. So, you're welcome, China. Now, can we please have our manufacturing back? Because Detroit and the rest of the Rust Belt really isn't doing too good. So the Soviet engineers and scientists, they're helping kickstart China's nuclear program because Russia wants to expand communism, so they're warming up to all of the countries that are dumb enough to follow it. And this partnership didn't really last that long because Mao, China's leader, and Khrushchev, the Soviet Union's leader, clashed a lot politically, which is very common amongst communist dictators. They're all very paranoid. So in 1959, the Soviets just pull out all of their people and resources and knowledge. But China kept going because they had a really valuable resource, people to exploit. So they built all of the infrastructure from scratch, while half of their country is starving, and all of the youth are ratting out on all their adults for not being communist enough. And in 1964, they test their first bomb, codenamed 596. 596 being a reference to the year 1956 and the month June of when the Soviets left the Chinese program, which is so goddamn petty. So now we have the fifth nuclear power in China. And now we're on to India. So India became independent from the Brits in 1947, and then they watched Japan get smoked by the Americans, and now the Brits have the bombs, so they're like, oh god, it's gonna happen again. So they developed their own nuclear program, but they said it was gonna be for peace, which it smells like bullshit just as much as their trains do. Which, yeah, they're talking about building atoms for peace, not war, but they're building their program in such a way that they can easily pivot to weapons, which is the smart move. I'm not making fun of them for it and calling them liars, because since when has the government ever told the full truth about anything? But at this point, they didn't start developing a nuclear bomb. They had the capability to if they needed, but they didn't really have a reason to yet, at least in their minds. And then they lost a border war with China, and they went, oh, that's not good. And then China detonated their bomb, and they went, oh, that's really not good. So in the 1970s, India goes, okay, we got to militarize. And they used plutonium from a Canadian-supplied reactor called Cyrus, which, yes, Canada Canada had nuclear reactors, which means they have the capacity to build a nuclear weapon, but they're not gonna, because they got a big brother downstairs, bench pressing 405. So at that point, why go to the gym? You know, the only guy touching your borders is your ally, and he's got a big damn stick. An Indian scientist developed a device that they called a peaceful nuclear explosion. Yeah. And in 1974, India tests their first bomb under Operation Smiling Buddha, officially joining the nuclear club. So now the list of nuclear countries is growing, and the nuclear powers don't like that because they don't want to share. That means they have to respect other people. Because, yeah, the only countries that really get respect on the world stage are the ones that are a threat. And because now India is a serious threat, this lit a fire under the ass of Pakistan. Because they don't like each other, despite being the same people, just practicing a different religion. That's enough to be considered a different group of people. The British didn't really help all that much by cutting the country unevenly and segregating them based on religion. But you know, it's up to them to figure it out at this point. So Pakistan, they start their program right after India's tests in 1947. So research began, but the real progress didn't begin until a scientist named Abdul Khan, which is such a badass name, came back from studying abroad in Europe with the Dutch. He'd been working on a Dutch firm with centrifuges that enriched uranium. So Khan brought back some designs with him, and he sets up a secret lab in Islamabad. That's a real place. I didn't know until the making of this video that that's the capital of Pakistan. Islam. They're a primarily Muslim nation, and the name of their capital sounds like it's saying Islam is bad. Our language, phonetically, that's what it sounds like, but the actual meaning means like the city of Islam or the city of peace. Because the suffix at the end, Abad, just means like a place of cultivation or a city. So yeah, they're enriching uranium in secret, and by the 1980s, they have enough material to make a few bombs, but they held off testing because they didn't want the world to know just yet. So when India tested again in 1989, Pakistan was like, that's cool. You want to watch us level this mountain range? Which they tested not 1, but 6 underground detonations in the Changi Hills, thus becoming the 7th nuclear power on Earth and the first Muslim-majority nation to have the bomb. And then there's Israel, which took a very different approach. So after multiple wars with their Arab neighbors who attacked them for no reason at all, Israel was alone in a sea of enemies of their own creation that they realized we can't really rely on anybody to help. So they came to the conclusion that they needed the bomb, as if it was promised to them 2,000 years ago. So in the 1950s, France, those bastards, secretly helped Israel develop a nuclear reactor, supposedly for research purposes, but France didn't really like the Muslim world at the time, and the Muslim world didn't really like France at the time. The Muslim world still really does not like France, as does most of the world. People don't really like each other, but France thought it was strategic of them to warm up to Israel, as it was the only really ally they had in the region, so they could use them for intelligence and shit. So they're like, hey, we'll help you build the bomb. So by the 1960s, there was a nuclear test off the coast of South Africa that the US detected. This piqued the US's interest, as this is not supposed to happen, as a nuclear bomb was just detonated, and we don't know who did it. So intelligence eventually finds out that it was Israel, and that Israel has nuclear weapons. So they quietly made a deal that so long as Israel wouldn't test anymore or publicly admit it, Washington wouldn't press the issue. And since then, Israel has been repeatedly asked by press, are you in possession of nuclear weapons? And multiple times from a guy named Simon Yitzhak and more recently Benjamin Netanyahu all keep repeating the phrase, well, Israel won't be the first country to introduce nuclear weapons to the Middle East. And the press is like, okay. So it's basically an open secret. They're not considered a nuclear power on the world stage, but they are. Like, everybody knows, and they know everybody knows, but they're just acting like nobody knows. So Israel just basically treats nuclear weapons as America treats Jeffrey Epstein, both of which are very explosive areas of conversation. And then there's South Africa, which is an outlier because they're the first and only country to develop nuclear weapons and then dismantle them. Fucking pussies. To handle a little bit of power. During the apartheid era in the 1970s, South Africa was isolated and really goddamn paranoid. They were surrounded by Soviet-backed movements, cut off by sanctions, and the government secretly developed uranium enrichment technology. And they used it to make 6 gun-type uranium bombs, which is the same type of bomb that Little Boy was. They're simple relative to nuclear physics, but powerful. There's evidence that they tested one of the bombs in 1979 in the South Atlantic. This is known as the Vela incident, which the Vela was an American satellite, and America was just like, hey, did you guys do this? And South Africa was like, no. So in the 1990s, when the apartheid was about to collapse, they signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty and dismantled all of their nuclear warheads to show the world that denuclearization is possible and disarmament is possible and that the world could go. No, to me, it was a fuck you because they're losing power and they didn't want the newly democratic government to get the bombs, which is so goddamn petty and hilarious to me. Imagine you're like a new government forming in the wake of a dying corrupt one, and you're like, we're gonna become a nuclear power, it's gonna be great, and then right before you take power, they're like, nope, sorry, got rid of them all. Good luck. We already signed the treaty. It's so petty, but it's really gangster and kind of a badass way for a failing government to go. So that's how South Africa became a nuclear power and then lost it. And now we're on to North Korea. So after the Korean War, the United States was stationing nuclear weapons in South Korea. It put them within range of both China and Russia. It was a strategic location. But the Kims didn't like that. As well as the Soviet Union and China. They didn't like American nuclear weapons on their continent. So in the 60s, the Soviets helped them build a reactor for research purposes and for power because they wanted to prop up a lot of their communist allies and just as for a way to say, guys, look, communism works when you force it. And then, as you'd expect, over time, it slowly became militarized and they were trying to develop weapons-grade plutonium. So by the 1980s, they successfully extracted plutonium. And by the 90s, America was like, stop. So in the 1990s, they signed an agreement with the United States to stop working on their nuclear... They didn't stop working on their nuclear project. So in 2003, they withdrew from the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and in 2006, they tested their first bomb. Which after that, you could collectively hear every Western country's sphincter muscles contract at the same time. But it was a small bomb, and at the time, they didn't have intercontinental ballistic missile capabilities, so the world kind of relaxed a bit. Except for South Korea, they really were still unhappy about that. Because they were the only westernized country in North Korean nuking distance. And then that all changed in 2017 when they claimed to have ICBM capabilities of reaching the United States. So that's it. That's how every country got the bomb. So thank you so much for watching. That's all I really have to say. Hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, then you're a masochist for sticking to the end. And I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.